Hey, what's up? This is Gavin from Gavin's Guitar Tips. Today we're going to talk all about our fretting hand and a few things we can do to make it very capable and fast with exercises. And I think it's actually quite easy compared to our picking hand, which is a little harder to learn. This is an example of a big, long, legato-y 3-note per string line that we can get that sort of chops by doing these exercises quite easily. We can also have our arpeggios improve their quality. Because so much of this is really just trying to get my left hand up to speed there. With all these things, what is the key here, in my opinion? It's working on the pull-offs part of legato, of hammer-ons and pull-offs. So let's take a scale. I was doing D minor as my key there. I'm going to do a D minor 3-note per string scale. And the first thing to think about is just making sure our fundamentals are correct for how we place our fingers on the fretboard. So the number one key thing here you just want to avoid is you don't want your finger buckling down. We want good curl in our fingers, right? The fingertip is making contact, not the underside. So that's the first thing, just to make sure, especially that it doesn't happen on like the middle and ring fingers. So just make sure that's good for essential technique stuff. Then our hammer-ons and pull-offs, we got to make sure are good. Usually everyone understands hammer-ons well. No problem going up the scale, right? And then a lot of people really struggle with getting these pull-offs clean. So there's a few things we have to note here for the pull-off. So one is it's a pull down. That's really the best way to think of it. I'm using these 3 frets, 15, 13, 12 on my E string. I'm not pulling off, right? Did you see that? I'm not pulling away from the fretboard. I'm pulling down. I'm exaggerating the motion here, but that is the same type of muscle I want to actually use when I do it. So really think about retracting just the finger into the hand, not flicking away the hand, right? This is kind of something that we get in the habit of, especially if we have always thumb over position, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but even here in this thumb over position, think about the fingers retracting into the palm, not achieving the pull off by twisting the wrist, or right? Because we want to exercise the actual fingers, make the fingers strong on our left hand. That's what's going to help. So once we have that, the next concern, right? Once we even get one string kind of sounding good with the pull-offs, is we have to make sure we have the transitions right for the strings. And this can be tricky to understand the order of operations. So even just one string transition, we want to make sure it's totally clean, no gaps between it. So something that often happens is we finish this string and then we jump everything over at once. And there's this little moment of gap. So what I want you to think about is this last note that we pull off to, 15, 13, 12, has to stay ringing. That first finger has to stay down while we get our pinky into position on the B string. So it's still ringing while I'm getting the pinky ready. And then there's kind of this exchange where the first finger is still held down, the pinky is hovering over the string ready to, hit on that next one. And then in a moment, we pick, and at that exact instance, our first finger is allowed to lift. And when we lift, right after that, we want to flam down the previous 2 fingers to come behind it because we need them to pull off too. So here's the whole operation, right? First string is easy. We want everyone set up already. While first finger's ringing, we get pinky in position. Okay, it's ready. Now make the swap, pinky down, first finger up, and then everyone else comes behind it immediately, kind of like a flam, right? So we're here, pinky down, then everyone follows right after so that we can pull off to them. Same situation now for the next string. Sometimes just getting that right can be really difficult, especially for beginners. But it's so important to make sure the sound is clean between the 2 strings. That's almost not the best example. That's okay. I want to play hyper clean there. Because then if you really pay attention to that transition, you should be able to pull off very cleanly through the 3-note per string scale like that. And chances are, even just this, getting it very clean and even sounding is going to be hard enough a challenge. So just working on that, excellent, excellent, excellent. You want to get your pull-off speed proficient. Now let's say you've done that a bit. You're kind of proficient. You can do this reliably, right? Now you can do it through your different 3-note per string positions. Then what we want to try to do is to repeat this phrase all around the fretboard. So meaning just pull-offs. I'm visualizing my whole fretboard here in the key of D minor using just pull-offs. I'm going to pick the beginning of each 3-note per string phrase. And now I'm just going to kind of play around, right? And I can go anywhere. I can go up, down, left, right. I can stay if I'm not sure where to go, and then I can think, okay, I'm going to go over there. Now let's see. Try to be as focused as we can here. Make a little mistake, and it's okay. Keep going. Try to keep it moving. Because part of what this is doing is this is exercising that hand to the point of fatigue. We want to keep doing this until it really starts to burn, and you'll feel it in your left hand. And then when it does, which is going to inevitably happen for however long you do that, your hand starts to burn, give it a rest for 30 seconds. It needs time to recharge, get the blood back flowing. But it's good that we push it to the point where your hand is really from the pull-offs, from the legato going, woo! That's tiring. That means we're pushing it, and the muscle growth will actually happen, or the tendons, whatever the hell is happening. What I would really recommend for this, just the 3-note per string thing, and I used to do this for like months, and it was so good for me when I wanted to warm up my left hand. First thing I do when I sit down with the guitar is I put the metronome on, right? And let me set a slower speed so we can understand what's going on. So I'm going to do 100 beats per minute. I'm going to do 3 notes per click, da 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 da, right? And I just did this to warm up. That's all I did, right? And you do that for 5-10 minutes, or to the point, you know, you do it for a minute where you fatigue, give your hand 30 seconds to rest. You can work on your picking hand, swap back in another minute, give yourself 30 seconds. Within 5 minutes, dude, your fretting hand is going to be, woo, really pumped up and feeling it. And then you go back to any of our kind of, you know, normal playing, and you realize like, oh, this is way easier, because most of the time we're not just doing straight pull-offs, and the pull-offs are way harder than the hammer-ons. So we can also do a similar pattern here with the pentatonic scale. And I love the pentatonic scale for the legato stuff because there's quicker string changes and there's quicker use of the same finger. So it's really good for getting this ring finger and this pinky finger activated. If we think of our default minor pentatonic position, right, we usually use our pinky and then 3 of our ring finger in a row and then 2 of our pinky. So we've got this nice opportunity to use the same finger a lot in a row. What I want to imagine now is we're going to build a little circular loop. So we're going to go from our A string, 10-12, to our D string, 10-12, right? I did hammers up and then straight back. And the way this is working is I'm only going to pick when I change strings. So imagine that this is my lowest note and this is my highest note of these 4 notes, right? I go from the lowest note to the highest note and back. This is what the pattern would sound like if I picked it, right? Right, that's the loop. I never repeat a note, and I only pick now when I change strings. Right, and now I'm incorporating hammer-ons and pull-offs in a sort of circular loop of just those 2 strings. So even just that is great to work on. Then you can do that on the different sets of strings, right? Try the ones with the 2 pinky shapes. That's really good for the pinky. And something to keep in mind here too is try to always localize the motion to the fingers. I felt it there for a second where I was, my shoulder raised a little bit, right? We might sort of jet the elbow out. We want as much of the challenge here going to the fingers. We want to work out the fingers. So what you can do with that is you can change the region size of your loop. You can make it across 3 strings. Right? So same principle. This is now my lowest note. This is now my highest note of these 6 notes. And I'm just going to make sure I don't repeat a note and only pick once. Hammer-ons and pull-offs make everything possible. And then you realize, hey, I can change the region on the fly, right? Right? And that's great for one position. And then we say, hey, how do we not get stuck in just the one position? And this is something I love with pentatonic scales is I encourage, you know, if you want to play like me, you don't have to, but the way I do things is I use the first finger, the index, for every shape, every fingering, right? So traditionally, if we go to like our next position in the pentatonic scale from this F here, people would call this like starting from the major scale position of the key, right? And so a lot of people might play this using our middle, then pinky, then first, then pinky for that next shape. I am going to say I'm going to still use this first and ring. Like whenever I have a whole step shape, I always use first finger and ring finger. Whenever I have a minor third shape, I always use first finger and pinky. Why do I do that? Well, for one, my first finger and pinky, or sorry, my first finger and ring finger, I think is always going to be faster than my middle and pinky, right? This is always going to be slower for me than this. Right? The next reason is that if I'm always using my first finger in every single fingering, I can reliably always shift to it. Right? Let's say I'm in this position and I want to shift over to this next position. I don't have to worry about it starting with my middle finger and my brain getting confused about which fingering. I could do something like this. I could go and back, right? And so you can use this to switch between positions horizontally, right? I can move up this scale like I was doing before. Maybe have a little loop. And then here, I shift wherever I want. I slide in a first finger note, right? Because if there's a set here and a set here, they both have the first finger. One might have ring finger, one might have pinky, but they both always have first finger. So I can switch on the first finger. That's what I'm doing. If I do it really slow, cool. And you can go everywhere. So I love this style of exercising too, because it's really intense on our left hand, but we can use our brain to work through the scale, see the shapes, the different positions, and associate them better. I'm going to leave you with one more little bonus suggestion, which is basically to try to do things that also challenge our vertical movement of our left hand. So for example, if you just took like 2 of these strings from a pentatonic scale, even also we can do with pentatonic, by the way, just pull-offs. If you just took that and just worked on that, you'd get really strong pinky, right? But maybe not a very smart pinky. And this has to do with the distance we move our fingers. So part of what makes like an arpeggio shape particularly hard, especially when it's brand new, is not just the speed of the fingers, but the intelligence of the fingers to know where to move on the fretboard. For example, I love doing this kind of diminished arpeggio, which I could say is sort of from our Locrian root note. And it was a very hard fingering for me at first. It's almost all ring finger and pinky in the fingerings. And it's just hard to know exactly where to move everything. Another thing that we notice is that the first finger does a lot more moving a lot of times in these arpeggios. So we need to build exercises that challenge the moving the fingers around in different locations. So a good basic one I really like for this is just sort of taking a power chord shape, a 5th shape, and copying it through the strings using 1 note per string. So for example, 10, 12, 10, 12, 10, 12. Here's the other thing too. Our first finger gets really dumb because our first finger is used to just sort of hanging out behind everybody, and you can just bar and basically always be there available. So usually most of our first fingers are really lazy. So even just doing like this kind of movement, really good. So that's good for vertical movement, this kind of exercise. And then we can, oh, what is that? You can move it through the scale correctly. It's kind of a weird shape. Then the next thing you got to think about is the horizontal movement, which is tough. So instead of fingering like a minor 1, 3, 5, 1 arpeggio like that, which is very common, we would, or like a, instead of either of those, what we're going to do is we're going to go 1, 3, first, middle, 5, and then 1. Right, so we're practicing moving really that first finger 2 frets forward. We can make it even harder by moving the first finger another 2 frets forward to the octave. Sorry, that is the 2. That's a 9. 1, 3, 5, 1, 9. Or you could say 1, 3, 1, 3, 5, 1, 2, right? And you can also try that through the different parts of the scale, like this. Ooh, I have not practiced that as much lately, so it's a tough one. That's all I got for today. Hopefully you learned some stuff. It's really basic, but I swear it works. Practice pull-offs. Practice pull-offs relentlessly. Your left hand will get so strong. I'm at the point where I'm like, I just always am practicing picking hand because it's like, I know I could get my left hand faster if I need it, but it's not my problem anymore because these exercises, it's straightforward. You learned it in 10 minutes and you can just work on that for your life and you will continually get better with your left hand. If you're interested in private lessons, DM me on Instagram. If you're interested in checking out some of my music, I have a few projects I'm a part of, some more death metal, some more sort of emo, clean guitar stuff. Please check those out in the description as well. And have a good one.